We are currently at the second session of the Southern Africa Permanent People's Tribunal on Transnational Corporations. So the whole aim of a Permanent People's Tribunal is that as a community who's been affected by a transnational corporation, people don't really have a way of getting any justice for it.
The tribunal was an idea which was born directly at the occasion of the second Russell Tribunal on dictatorships in Latin America. They said that it would be important to have something which was not simply ad hoc, which could become a permanent support to liberation struggles, both the traditional ones and the new ones which were appearing in front of the diffusion of an economic power. So after the colonial era, where the traditional so-called international law could be applied, we started in the 80s in front of the growing role of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to take the economic problem into account.
Eu disse não. Então você não pode sair aqui no meu gabinete se assinar. Eu disse não. Senhor chefe, você que está a aceitar, confia na caneta, mas eu não. Minha caneta é terra. O meu marido foi ameaçado para ser baleado. Senhor, vais morrer. Eu vou te balear. Meu marido disse que eu posso morrer através da minha terra, porque a terra é meu patrão. Digo isso, no corredor tem aquela moça que reassentou a família, mais de 150 famílias, e o maior número são mulheres. Mulheres que dependiam só da terra.
Did you approach WWF or USAID because they pretend to defend human rights and fundamental rights? And the Nacala corridor is violating the fundamental rights of peasants. It is interesting to see how their case in Africa are so close to the other case in Latin America, for example, or even in Caribbean island, where the peasants now are really under attack by the transnational, with the help of the government of the country of peasants.
One of the programs is Prosper Instance, which is a trilateral program involving the government of Japan, Mozambique, and Brazil. The programs will be implemented in 19 districts, occupying 14 million of hectares in a region which is one of the most productive regions, which is Nacala Corridor. As you can see in the map, it's a huge agribusiness model undermining the food production system or the small-scale farmer food production system in a country. In Mozambique, we're talking 80% of people, or 80% of people who are economically active, they are small-scale farmers, and who are also responsible for producing of 90% of food consumed in the country.
I think that the themes I mentioned before, which have been dealt with the tribunal, they are very much interrelated. So the fact of having an interest for Southern African countries, we cross obviously problems which have to do with classical strategies of multinational corporations, which are the alliance with states, which are dependent on them. Then they have a policy which is of exploiting whatever could produce some goods or some component of the market. So the multinationals do not have limits nor frontiers.
Monsanto Malawi is one of the 24 seed suppliers of the Farm Input Subsidy Program of the Malawi government. Last season, 2016-17, development partners such as Irish Aid and the European Union contributed $5 million, about 3.6 billion, which went towards the seed purchasing.
So the donor agencies, if I understood you correctly, donor agencies give money to the Malawian government, who in turn gives it basically to Monsanto, or the company that you mentioned here. Do farmers have a choice? Do they have to go for the hybrid seed, or if they refuse it, can they still benefit from the program?
We do not have choice, madam. We don't choose.
The only way, this is the argument, the only way that Africa will be able to feed itself is through commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization means you must have the right inputs. There must be good hybrid seeds that produce well. They only produce well under certain conditions. They produce well when you've got irrigation. They produce well when you've got fertilizer. They produce well when you've got agrochemicals. But how many farmers out there really have access to those things? Okay. Yeah, okay, now the FISP program recognizes that. They say the farmers don't have access. So what we must do is we must put resources so that those farmers can get access. But okay, so we've already forgotten the question about, is this the most appropriate model? Now we're moving to the implementation. Yes, we need access. Let us use public sector resources and channel them, if it comes from donors, if it comes from taxation, whatever it comes from. Channel those resources to subsidize the market for these guys. Okay, so they really are subsidizing this market.
The implementation of transnational are more visible in former colonized countries. They used to do that before. It was not the transnational, but it was the state, the colonizer state. Now it's the transnational because the world changed. We are now under financiarization and liberalism. That's why now it's transnational.
While colonies were part of the direct interest, now colonies are no more existent, so they are no more part of the life of Europe. They are part of the life of the multinationals. From Europe, Australia, they mix up China. And in that sense, they are part of a chronicle which has to do with the market instead than with community.
This company has obtained 1 mining and 3 exploration properties covering more than 400 square kilometers in the southwestern region of Madagascar. And given its size, you can imagine that it encloses the territories of more than 12 communes. We don't want this mining project, these mining concessions to be exploited because they cover several environmentally sensitive areas, and these include the Mikea forest, which is home to the Mikea indigenous group. The definition of an indigenous group is that it is a group of people which is unique with distinct culture and ways of life which are totally dependent on land and forest resources. Until when can they live as they would like to? If this mining project is allowed to proceed, then this until when is likely to be very soon. I mean, the end of the Mikea people. The death of all these people because they cannot survive outside of this forest.
They don't care about the life, they don't care about the environment, and they don't care about the people. They are helped by the government, because the government gets some advantage, financial or whatever, the building on one road or one school, whatever.
And the mining companies never ask people what they do really need, but they just come with a package and they build schools and then they leave. So people are not used to these infrastructures. Some of them have never seen schools in their life. They don't even know what is this. And there are no teachers coming with the school. It's just an empty house. So it's not adapted at all.
Today we are living in a very, very, very difficult situation. There is in fact a war of economy against people globally.
Government leaders in the area also have been very active in suppressing any campaign against or opposing or challenging the uranium mining. Any activist who is doing awareness to the government, that person will be arrested immediately and be put into detention. Violation of labor rights has been an order of the day. When we visited the other time, we found people were not even wearing their protective gears, working in the very dangerous areas, because we were wearing these detectors which showed that the areas was highly in a high radioactive in terms of radiation. Some of them who are doing exploration, who are working there, they have started complaining about diseases like coughing, skin rashes, and some of them they're complaining of being unable to perform sexual intercourse. So when uridium start being sprayed by water, soil, contamination, food, no one will be safe, even the political leaders who are campaigning for uranium mining in Tanzania. Thank you so much, and thank you for additional time. Thanks.
We probably need to also look at other instruments where we really hold both the state and the mining companies to account. And I really wonder if this isn't one of the cases that we can use as a test case for the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Court. I mean, if the courts in Tanzania will not deal with the kind of atrocities and the environmental degradation and the health impacts that you talked about.
We have to break the alliance between multinational and states, because that is the big problem. We have really to have a criteria for establishing a resistance first, and then a cultural resilience formulation, which is also wide as much as possible, in order to make links and to allow a recognition of different peoples in different continents.
Nesses encontros para mim são úteis e gosto de ouvir, e gostei também de ouvir outros países. Tem outros projetos, outros projetos que vêm que prejudicam a eles. Afinal das contas, pensei que estivesse só Moçambique e já estamos a ter experiências. A mesma luta que temos lá, intimidando-nos e ameaçando-nos, nós não ficamos atrás, ainda continuamos a lutar.
Continue advocating about food sovereignty, because we know food sovereignty, it can favor our local seeds, and it can make us to eat the real food rather than eating peppers like the maize we are eating nowadays.
I have learned a lot here, and I know that in Africa, different countries, we are facing with the same challenges. We are under panic with our government. Why? It's because of poverty. I think we need to think twice, because in Africa we have potential. We can become rich if we can use that potential what we have. And Africa is a backbone continent for agriculture.
Because what we are trying to do and what we have to do is build a very deep solidarity among struggling people in Southern Africa. Otherwise, we stand absolutely no chance of defeating this extreme power that is set up against us. And our journey is not to wait on a declaration coming out of the jurors, although we are waiting for that. But we are wanting to use that as an instrument to enhance our struggles as they are pursuing. And we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have achieved without that resistance, that struggle that has brought us to this point and allowed us to lay a foundation for what I believe is a very important campaign to dismantle the power of these transnational corporations.
That we have to re-establish the fact that all the people who have some, say, I don't know, hope or trust or needs for a future based on human values must learn much more to interact. We can't pretend, obviously, to change the economic world in a way, but to say, look, adjustment with a human face.
Africa, Qina Africa, qina! Ama!